Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're gathered together today on this Sabbath day to worship our Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach, worship our Father, Yahweh. We've just finished our feasts of tabernacles for this year, and Yahweh poured out His Spirit upon us in a mighty way. We had a lot of attendance from people from out of town. We had good services, good testifying and fellowshipping, and we were blessed by Yahweh. I think that He is showing the world through the little congregations that are able to understand what feast keeping is all about. It's a testimony, it's a light to the people, and maybe they will begin to see in this day and age that we live how important it is that we start coming under the nurture and admonition of Yahweh. We look at the world and we see confusion. Our government's in turmoil, and being the largest government in the world as ever has been, the most prosperous empire in the condition it's in today, it's unsettling for a lot of people. But we look into the other nations and see that they're, in some cases, more unsettling than we are. There's not a nation that's not experiencing trouble and everything. And they begin to wonder why. Man has always tried to rule himself, always tried to run his own life. And we pretty soon get in trouble when we try to do that without some basis for direction. Yahweh is in control. We need to understand that. That's the title of the message today, that Yahweh is in control. Even when it looks like it's out of control, Yahweh is still in control. What's out of control is our attitude and our understanding toward it. Now, we have to have a belief in this in order for us to understand what Yahweh is trying to do in this day and age. He is making way for His prophecies to be fulfilled. He wrote from the beginning. He laid out a plan for it. And many people have not really understood that plan and not recognized how they fit in the plan, because they really don't know who they are. Did Yahweh really create a government for the people to work under? Did He really set up rules and regulations for people to walk by and prosper? And when we see all of the confusion that goes on, we wonder, is that true? But Yahweh is in control, and we have to come to that understanding and get in line with His thinking. Who are we? Think about that. Who are we? Until we can understand who we are and how we relate to what Yahweh has spoken to us, the commandments He has given us to keep, and we are willing to follow His will, there will always be confusion around in the world, because He uses confusion and affliction for chastisement. Israel has been afflicted since day one, you might say. Ever since they were a federated nation, they have been afflicted. And it behooves us to understand that in this day, Israel still exists, but not exactly like most people think. There are several stories about Israel in the formation, and we couldn't cover them all today, and if we had all day, we still couldn't cover them all. But Solomon was the greatest king in Israel. At the height of his reign, Israel was the most powerful nation that had ever been. Israel was more advanced in sciences than any nation that had ever been. If you go back and look in regular history and you research this, you'll find that Israel was flourishing during the height of what we know as the Bronze Age. And the Bronze Age was a very scientific era, and they created much metallurgy during that time. They already had iron too. They people like to kind of separate it, that one come first and like that, but the point is, it was just important times, but they had those metals, and that caused great industry, and especially in warfare. And all the nations that was fighting during that time, they dealt in warfare. And that's the reason we see, when we read history, nearly every nation has a history of warfare. And we have lived in this country just a short while, but in our lifetime, there has been about 3 world wars and just hundreds of skirmishes and wars. And it looks like chaos. Think about it. It just looks like chaos. But Yahweh's still in control. He's understanding this. But see, when Solomon, following after his father David, walked righteously, the nation grew and flourished. And long as a nation, in whatever era, will walk righteously and follow Yahweh's rule, they'll flourish in many ways. And so David lived for Yahweh and flourished. And he proved it by the life that he lived was recorded through, and his conversations with Yahweh is recorded in the Psalms. And we understand that the mentality of David and how he believed in the Creator and how he sought Him for every decision he made. Solomon comes along, and as a child, he requests that Yahweh give him the wisdom and understanding to rule the people. And as long as he had the tender heart, he was able to do that, and he flourished. And he believed that Yahweh was doing everything that he had promised to do through the generations that was before him. And so he flourished to the height of his glory. You know, it said no man or nothing was done any greater than Solomon, and even the lilies was not arrayed, or Solomon was not arrayed like the lilies, because he tried his best to have clothes and stuff to where he would look real good. But he depended on Yahweh, and then when he died, his son was to take his place. And this is where Israel begins to go off track. Because when Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all the Israel were come to Shechem to make him a king. And that's found in 2 Chronicles chapter 10 and verse 1. And it happened when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard of it, for he was in Egypt. If you remember, Jeroboam was a general in Solomon's army, and he had a falling out with him and had to go into exile, but he was coming back. He says, where he had fled from the presence of King Shlomo, that Jeroboam returned out of Mitzrayim, or Egypt. Verse 3, they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all Israel came, and they spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke grievous. In other words, their yoke was their burden, and their military obligation, and their taxation obligation, and so Solomon had taxed them pretty heavy to build the kingdom to the height of his glory. You know, it takes a lot of work and a lot of finance, and one man don't do it all. Every man has to work together to do it. He says, now therefore, make you the grievous service of your father, and his heavy yoke which he spent on us, lighter, and we will serve you. In other words, it's like the politics today. They come to him and says, lower our taxes, give us a relief, let the economy work where we can work and flourish, and we'll put up with your government. That's basically what it's saying. And he said to them, come again after 3 days. The people departed. In other words, come back in 3 days and I'll tell you what we'll do. And verse 6, he says, King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men who had stood before Shlomo, his father, and while he had yet lived, saying, what counsel do you give me in return to this people? In other words, he inquired of the old men that had seen and had experience, and says, what shall I do? They spoke to him, saying, if you are kind to this people, and please them, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. See, this policy would work today if somebody had gumption enough to listen to it. But he forsook the counsel of the old men which they had given him, and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and who stood before him. You know, they grew up in their adolescent age and on up through adulthood, and they had their own ideas. He said to them, what counsel give you, that we may return answer to this people who have spoken to me, saying, make the yoke that your father did put on us lighter. See, he understood what they was asking for. And the young men who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, thus shall you tell the people who spoke to you, saying, your father made your yoke heavy, but make you it lighter to us. Thus shall you say to them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Now whereas my father did laid you with the heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. See, it's not good enough to go on like we was going. You're going to have more. He said, my father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. I think America's getting that feeling. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king bade, saying, come to me again on the third day. And the king answered them roughly. And the king Rehoboam forsook the counsel of the old men, and spoke to them afterward the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add thereto. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So the king didn't listen to the people, for it was brought about of Elohim that Yahweh might establish word which he spoke to Erkiah the Shiloni, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. In other words, we see that Yahweh was instrumental in this decision. He deceived him. He directed him in his heart to let him answer the cause of the advice of the young men, because Yahweh was fixing to chastise Israel. And he was going to afflict Israel in order for them to learn what it's all about. In every generation it's been the same way. Yahweh's been in control. He has not been slack in his mission, and we need to understand that. In 2 Chronicles 10:16, when all Israel saw the king, that the king didn't listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, "What portion have we in David?" See, if you're going to do like that, what inheritance do we have in this thing? Neither have we inheritance in the son of Yishai. That's Jesse. Every man to your tents, Israel. Now see to your own house, David. So all Israel departed and went to their tents. And this was the answer of the people to King Rehoboam. Told him that he was David now. He was in David's place. See to your own house. In other words, they were not going to be his army anymore. He said, but as for the children of Israel who lived in the cities of Yehudah, Rehoboam reigned over them. Then King Rehoboam sent Hadrian, who was over the men subject to forced labor, and the children of Israel stoned him to death with stones. King Rehoboam made speed to get him up to his chariot and flee to Jerusalem. So Israel rebelled against the house of David. And see, that's what happens when the people don't listen to the rule, don't follow the rules. Yahweh allows them to be chastised. This day and age that we live in, we need to start looking back to Yahweh, because He is still guiding this, His direction. He's guiding us whether we realize it or not. But it would be better if this nation and these people in this country would walk in Yahweh's way and let Him bless them in this modern time. In chapter 11 and verse 1, when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled the house of Yehudah, Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men, and who were warriors, to fight against Israel, to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam. In other words, he did the natural thing. He gathered up his army. He said, we'll just go whip them and bring them back. We had a civil war in this country about the same thing. But here's what Yahweh said. Verse 2. But the word of Yahweh came to Shemaiah, the man of Elohim, saying, speak to Rehoboam, the son of Shilamo, king of Yehudah, and to all Israel in Yehudah and Benjamin, saying, thus said Yahweh, you shall not go up, nor fight against your brothers. See, Yahweh will put a stop to that. He says, return every man to his house, for this thing is of me. So they listened to the words of Yahweh and returned from going against Jeroboam. Rehoboam lived in Jerusalem and built cities. And he built it up all in what is known as Yehudah. And that consisted of the house of Benjamin and half the tribe of Levi. And he built his strongholds, and he prospered as long as he was doing what he said he would do. But in verse 13 of this chapter, chapter 11, the Kohanim and the Levites who were in all Israel resorted to him out of all their borders. Now, the Levites were scattered throughout the tribes, and they were scattered by order. They had their sons and their officers in Levi, and they tended to Yahweh's business. But when this rebellion came, they left Israel and went back to Judah. For the Levites left their suburbs and their possessions and came to Yehudah and Jerusalem, for Jeroboam and his sons cast them off, that they should not execute the Kohen's office to Yahweh. Now what happened here was that the Jeroboam, who became king of Israel, first king of Israel, he didn't want the people going back to Jerusalem or worshiping with the Kohanim, because he was afraid that they would turn their minds back to the king. So he expelled the Levitical priesthood, and that's the reason Levi, the whole tribe of Levi, was brought back to Judah. He said, and he appointed them Kohanim for the high places. Now this right here is something that many people don't pay that much attention to, but this is the downfall of Israel. And it might be the downfall of our country today because of the attitude that the people have. He says, he appointed them Kohanim for the high places. That means the pagan worship. And for the male goats and for the calves which he had made. And now these are idols. They made statues of goats and calves and stuff like that. You know, matter of fact, Israel made a calf out of gold under the direction of Aaron while Moses was up on the mountain. So they were well acquainted with that form of worship. After them, out of all the tribes of Israel, such as set their hearts to seek Yahweh and Elohim of Israel, came to Jerusalem to sacrifice to Yahweh, the Elohim of their fathers. So they strengthened the kingdom of Yehudah and made Rechavam, the son of Shlomo, strong 3 years, for they walked in the way of David and Shlomo. Judah, for 3 years, walked in the way that they were supposed to walk. Jeroboam, on the other hand, had turned the people to the idols. He said, Rehoboam took him a wife and a daughter of Jerimoth, the son of David, and the daughter of Levi, the son of Yishi. And she bore him sons, Yeshu and Shemaiah and Zelam. And after her he took Malchah, the daughter of Ashavam, and she bore him Aviah and Attai and Zia. And this was the families of the King Rehoboam. And it said, Rehoboam loved Malchah, the daughter of Absalom, above all his wives and his concubines, for he took 18 wives and 60 concubines, and became the father of 28 sons and 60 daughters. Rehoboam appointed Abiah, the son of Malchah, to be chief, and the prince among his brothers, for he was minded to make him king. See, he was showing favoritism to his children. And in verse 23, he says, he dealt wisely and dispersed all his sons throughout all the land of Yehudah and Benjamin to every fortified city, and gave them food in abundance, and he sought for them many wives. In other words, he took care of his sons for them to grow during that period that he was finding favor with Yahweh. While Israel, on the other hand, was directing their attentions toward paganism and coming out from under the rule of Yahweh and I think it's safe to say that they've been out from under the rule of Yahweh ever since. They've just had a few little revivals here and there, but not many. And what comes to the end of this is we have to recognize the sovereignty of Yahweh. If we don't do that, we're just floundering like the communist countries, the socialist countries, the Muslim countries. They're not coming ahead very far in spiritual terms, but Yahweh is the sovereign of the universe. That's the reason we can safely say that He is in control. In Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 32. Deuteronomy 4 and 32. For ask now of the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that Elohim created man on the earth, and from the one end of the sky to the other, whether there it has been any such thing as this great thing is, or has been heard like it. Think about what he's talking about here. Has anything ever been as great as what He had done for this people? He is showing the nations the sovereignty of Yahweh. Verse 33, did ever a people hear the voice of Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard and lived? Israel is the only nation, when they were in the wilderness, that had been brought out of a nation and that heard Yahweh speak from the mountain. Or has Elohim tried to go and take him a nation from the midst of another? See, we can't find in history where He has gone and took a nation out of another nation. Nation by trials, by signs, and by wonders, by war, and by a mighty hand, and by an outstretched arm, and by great terrors, according to all that Yahweh your Elohim did for you in Egypt before your eyes. See, they saw all of this with their eyes, and that is a testimony. So when we see things that's terrible and hard and things that we don't understand, that's a testimony to us. It's a time for learning. In verse 35, to you it was shown that you might know that Yahweh, He is Elohim. There is none else besides Him. The things that we have seen, the things that we've heard, the things we've learned, points us toward Yahweh. And we can know that there is none else but Him. There is no salvation under heaven except by Yeshua. He says, Deuteronomy 4:36, out of the heavens He made you to hear His voice, that He might instruct you. And see, this is the thing that the world seems to fall down on, is accepting the instruction from Yahweh. Now, they're always looking for something. They read a pamphlet on how to fix everything. They read and they study. They read books. They build governments. They write books about how to run governments. And some's false and some steers you the other way. But we need to understand the instruction of Yahweh. He is sovereign. He is in control. And when we lean toward Him, we see the work be done. And on earth He made you to see His great fire. And you heard His words out of the midst of the fire. Because He loved your fathers. Now you know why America became like as big a country as it is because Yahweh loved our fathers. It goes back, it's a hereditary thing. Yahweh loved our fathers. He says, therefore He chose their seed after them. That means that we're a chosen seed. If we can understand that, if He loved our fathers, We are chosen seed, and brought you out with his presence, with his great power, out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, to drive out nations from before you, greater and mightier than you, to bring you in and to give you their land for an inheritance as at this day. See, now this was the instruction in Deuteronomy. Moses was pointing the people to this day, that they will be delivered. He says, know therefore this day, and lay it in your heart, that Yahweh, He is Elohim in heaven above, and on the earth beneath, there is none else. See, we need to understand as a nation that Yahweh is our Elohim, and there is none else. There's no fabled religionist deities that exist. They're all figments of the imagination of man. Only Yahweh. Yahweh. He says, you shall keep his statutes. And see, the only way we can really know Yahweh and understand it is if we keep the statutes. If we don't keep the statutes, we don't know it. We just get chastised and we think we're having a hard time. And we don't come to any understanding. But when we begin to keep his statutes, that's when we understand. It's like the Sabbath day, the fourth commandment. We don't understand the Sabbath day till we start keeping it. And when we keep the Sabbath day, it becomes a sign to us. And we can understand the other Sabbaths, which are considered high Sabbaths, feast days. We can understand the beautiful picture of salvation through keeping the feast. The first feast, Feast of Unleavened Bread. It starts right after the blood sacrifice that pays for the sins of the world. And when we understand that, we begin to realize what he wants us to do. His mitzvot, which he command you this day. His mitzvot is the statutes. It's that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days on the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you forever. See, it did not fade in the wilderness. It did not fade in the judges. It did not fade when the federated government of Israel failed. It did not fade when they were driven into the world, driven through every nation. And we can find and track these people through every nation in the world, right up until this present day. And the majority of this people is in this country right here that has received this inheritance. And a few along the way has kept the commandments. A few have taught the commandments. A few have tried to keep the commandments. Even with the religious confusion that's in this country, there's a few that's still trying to keep the commandments. And the point here is that it has not stopped. It is still forever. If we keep these commandments, we can understand that Yahweh is in control. And no matter how much confusion is in the world that he is inflicting on the world to bring about his plan, we still know that Yahweh is in control. In 1 Chronicles, chapter 29:11, he said, your Yahweh is the greatness. Yahweh, we cannot magnify him and elevate him enough in our heart and in our mind, in the grandeur and the power and the love that he has for his people. And here's what he says. Your Yahweh is the greatness, the power, the glory, the victory, the majesty. For all that is in the heavens and in the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom. Can you imagine the blessing that is put on the people that follow this concept of Yahweh being in that position, we know who to ask for help. We know where to go for help. We know where to go for instruction. We know that if we need something, we can get it from Yahweh. He said, you are exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from you. See, people's always trying to get rich. Yahweh owns the cattle of 1,000 hills, and He owns the iron ore and the gold that's in them. And He distributes it when He wants to. He says, you rule over all. Yahweh rules over all, no matter what position that we're in. If we can see it, it's good. If we can't see it, we're just confused. He said, in your hand is power and might. These nations are always looking for power and might. You wonder why they pass laws like they do. Well, it's greed, and greed leads to power. Power supports greed, and it works. And so they try to control in every nation. No matter how small the nation or how large the nation, there are elements that try to control. But Yahweh is in control. And it is in your hand to make great. It's in Yahweh's prerogative to make these little congregations accomplish what He wants them to do. He can make us great in the eyes of the people, and we're not even a blip on the screen as far as size goes. But the truth that comes out of these little congregations really works. I had an email from a little pastor down in the Philippines. Yeah, just a blip. He said, thank you for the sermon. He gets a sermon on the YouTube, and he's happy in the Philippines. He says, and give strength to all. See, Yahweh is the one that gives the strength for us to get through all of this chaos that we have to do in this time that we're living. Verse 13, now therefore, our Elohim, we thank you. Let's thank Yahweh for everything. Thank Him for what He is telling us to do. He says, and praise your glorious name. See, when we come to congregation, it glorifies Yahweh. Everybody gets a little bit of something. We sing a little bit. We fellowship a little bit. We read the Scripture. We expound some on the Scripture. We learn just a little bit. We're not confessing that we know it all, but we learn some every time. And as we live that way, it glorifies Yahweh's name. So He's glorified when we come to His congregation on His Sabbath day, because we honor His Sabbath day. He says, but who am I? And what is my people, that we should be able to offer so willingly as this? For all things come of you. See, just who are we? What really does He see in us? Basically, is what the writer was saying. And we are in that same position. What does He see in this little effort that He's guiding? He says, and of your own have we given you. For we are strangers before you and foreigners, as all our fathers were. Our days on earth are as a shadow, and there is no abiding. See, it's just a vapor. It goes by so fast. We can do a little genealogical search and get a family member of a past generation that we really get interested in, and it's just a little blip on the screen, this little vapor. It's good to know a little bit of it, and sometimes we feel like we have relationships with them, but it's none abiding. In Psalms, this proves that David was close to Yahweh. Yahweh sat enthroned at the flood. So this is what Yahweh was telling David. A lot of people think David was the writer of this, but when you really get the context, Yahweh is speaking through David, and David's the scribe, and he's speaking to the world about himself. Yahweh sat enthroned on the flood. or at the flood. Yes, Yahweh sits king forever. No matter who tells you there is no deity, Yahweh sits as a king forever. You don't even have to argue it. You don't have to defend Yahweh. You know, some people get mad because they don't believe that somebody don't believe in the deity they're talking about, and you know they can have confusion. But don't worry about it. You don't have to defend your faith. You don't have to defend your Creator. He is the one that's defending you. He's king forever. For Yahweh Elyon is awesome. Yahweh the Most High is awesome in the universe. He is a great king over all the earth. He subdues nations under us. We've seen in our short history nations that has been subdued. This great nation that we live in now called America could be subdued in just a little while. He has ways of doing it. Basically right now we're in an economic situation he'd have us subdued by next Monday morning. Yahweh's in control. He said, the people's under our feet. Verse 4, He chooses our inheritance for us, the glory of Yahweh, whom He loved. Do you know what He said there? He chose Abram and He gave him a covenant. And Abram received that covenant and had his name changed to Abraham. And He made him father of nations. That means He set him as royalty over all the earth and over all the nations. And then it was passed on down to Isaac. And then Isaac passed it down to Yaakov. Yaakov then met the man on his return trip and wrestled with him all night and realized who he was. And his name was changed to Israel, which means he shall rule as El. That's what Israel's name is. And Israel, if they were doing right exactly what they're supposed to be doing, they would be ruling this world. If they would straighten up and walk in the path that Yahweh chose them. And He gave this inheritance to the people. David inherited this from his father. And Shlomo inherited from David. And right on down through the generations, the present generation has inherited from the generation before. And He chooses our inheritance for us, the glory of Yahweh, whom He loved. Let them be disappointed and dismayed forever. Yes, let them be confounded and perish, that they may know that you alone, whose name is Yahweh, are the Elyon over all the earth. He's the Most High over all the earth. And He is our inheritance. And we are His inheritance. And we need to understand that in order to receive the blessing and the benefit. Psalms 93, verse 1. Psalms 93. These Psalms cause us to have faith and be encouraged and be delivered from our burdens. We can still have to work and do all the things we do, but we don't have to be burdened mentally when we understand Yahweh. He said, Yahweh reigns. He is clothed with majesty. You know the description that's given in the book of Revelation in the throne room of Yahweh, how majestic He was clothed and dressed in His throne. That little description, it's mind-boggling to us when we understand it. But if we could really see it, it would shine the glory throughout the universe. He said, Yahweh is armed with strength. See, what most people don't even realize, that Yahweh runs and rules the entire universe. Everything that we know as creation, Yahweh is instrumental in running all of it. The world also is established. See, we don't have to worry about whether it comes or goes or anything like that, because it's established by Yahweh. And we're just like one ant in the ant hill. We're very small. But Yahweh said it can't be moved. See, it's established. He said, your throne is established from long ago. Yahweh's throne was way before He created man on this earth. It's not something that's just take for granted it's just there. It's established. You are from everlasting. Now that's something that the human mind has difficulty understanding. Is what is everlasting. It's always been here, it always will be here. Yahweh is everlasting. Yahweh's mental capacity is that He can see the beginning and the ending at the same time. Nothing is old and nothing is new. Yahweh understands it's established from forever. He says, for I know that Yahweh is great, that our sovereign is above all Elohim. Our sovereign, there is nothing that we can call a deity, whether it's a false. If there was a real deity out there somewhere, He's subjected to Yahweh. Nobody knows. He says right here in Psalms 135 and verse 6, whatever Yahweh pleased. Now think about pleasing Yahweh. And Yahweh is pleased with what He accomplishes. That He has done in heaven and in earth, in the seas and in all depths. See, the study of the ocean, oceanography they call it, we are just looking at like 3 or 4 sprinkles of salt on a clean dining room table in comparison. We can't get a good idea of what's under that ocean out there. And Yahweh created it, and Yahweh knows everything about it. Yahweh understands the pressure of water at 5 miles deep. Yahweh understands the water pressure at 35 miles deep in the Mariana Channel, off the Philippines, the deepest place in the earth. He understands the process of fish being reproduced. He understands all the microorganisms that control and rule this world, this earth. And everything is dependent on all of that. He controls the seas and the depths. Verse 7, who causes the clouds to rise from the ends of the earth. And those clouds in the last couple of weeks have been real beautiful right at sunset. The way they come up. Yahweh orchestrated all that. He painted that picture in His mind. And we get to see it. He said, who makes lightnings with the rain, who brings forth the wind out of His treasuries. See, Yahweh has control of the entire mechanism of the universe. Yeah. When we have a hurricane, Yahweh's guiding that hurricane. He's playing it probably just like you would be taking a pencil and a piece of paper and just playing on the paper to see what you can do. Yahweh just letting that thing come across the earth. And His wind comes from His treasuries. Bring us not into temptation. See, that's our plea and our prayer. When we understand this, we ask Him not to bring us into temptation. We don't question stuff that we shouldn't question, and we don't ignore stuff that we should do. So therefore, if we understand what our relationship with Yahweh, we would desire to be able to keep His commandments. We would desire to love Him above all deities that we could create in our mind. And we wouldn't bring His name to naught. And everybody's afraid or got a different idea of what bringing His name to naught means. Some people say you can't speak His name because we're too low on the scale. We're too defiled. We're human beings, so we would defile His name by speaking it. There is no way anybody can defile His name by speaking it. Now, you can defile His name by not speaking it. You bring it to naught. If you don't use it like Yahweh wants you to use, it's nothing. He says, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Let us remember that Yahweh is in control. Let us desire to walk with Yahweh. Let us look in the ways that He would have us to go and receive His blessing. May Yahweh bless and keep you.